What is up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today's reaction video is 5 ways British and American road trips are very different. Okay.
Longer.
100%, that has got to be the standout thing, hasn't it? American ones are longer. Not only longer, they seem extremely long compared.
Yeah, like days.
Like days, which is mad. I think anything over, 2 hours, Brits still moan. But anything over 2 hours, you're like, oh, that is a really long drive. 2 hours is like, okay, it's a bit of a long drive, but over 2 hours, you're like, oh.
Half an hour for us in Jersey in traffic is long.
In Jersey, half an hour is long. The only reason I say 2 hours is kind of acceptable is because that's kind of your local airport a lot of the time and stuff like that. So
yeah, or the beach.
Or the beach, or something like if you're in the middle. But I feel like if someone goes, you're on a 4 hour drive, oh, that's a whole day of driving.
Yeah.
It feels like a whole day.
It's funny because, like, obviously in Jersey, half an hour is long.
Yeah, in Jersey it is.
50 minutes from either side with no traffic.
Yeah.
So half an hour is long.
But
yet
UK
we
isn't.
drive, I don't know, so for example, when we go over at Christmas, we're going to go to Doncaster to the zoo.
Yeah.
That's a good half an hour drive.
And that's a short drive.
And it doesn't feel long.
And then you think a 2 hour drive is a long drive, but for Americans, oh, it's a 2 hour drive. We do 6 hour drives on the daily.
I know.
Do you know what I mean? It is mad. Let us know how long your, I guess, most common road trip
Your commute to work or...
Yeah, that would be interesting. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Smash that like button, guys. Smash the subscribe button. Launches links in the description. And let's check out 5 ways British and American road trips are very different.
Hello, my wife and I recently got back from a visit to West Virginia.
Okay.
And on that trip, it got me thinking, how do road trips compare between my homeland of Britain and the United States? And with America being the land of car culture and Britain that of public transit, Americans might be thinking, is a British road trip even a thing? And yes, it is.
Kind of
in
is.
my experience of doing road trips in both countries, it's a very different thing. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But one other journey that I've been on recently is the long march to 1 million subscribers. If you've done that, thank you. If you haven't, do that now.
Same here, would appreciate it.
In the meantime, here are 5 ways that British and American road trips are very different. Now, you can't really compare and contrast road trips in the United States with road trips in Britain without talking about the distance involved. So when we drove from Chicago to West Virginia, it was something like 400 miles. And if you were to take that distance as a percentage of the distance from the East Coast to the West Coast, it's not that much. However, if you were to do the same thing in Britain, you would end up in the sea. The point is, everyone knows at this point, America much larger than Britain. But what happens with that is that once you move to the United States, even having grown up in Britain, your perspective of distance changes. You see, it used to be that when I was a kid, we'd drive from Grimsby, my hometown, down to the southwest coast, and it took a few hours. We thought that was an eternity, because in British terms, that is. Remember, we're a country that's the size of Wyoming. But what struck me on this road trip recently is that I didn't really consider it that long at all. I mean, granted, I am now in my 40s, so my lower back felt it, but my brain didn't.
Yeah.
You know,
that
it was
is
as if
pain of
this was
driving.
a normal thing to do. Of course, while I'm on the road, I get the peace of mind knowing that my name and address are far from the clutches of data brokers. Of course, there's one thing that I think probably helps Americans get used to the idea of driving a bit further
Bigger
than we like
cars?
in Britain, and that's the size of our vehicles.
Yeah,
I may have mentioned it before, but not only is the country much bigger than the United Kingdom, but so are the cars.
You know what? Got to back it up because it was really, like, I enjoy driving in the UK, I enjoy when we drive, but driving an American car was so much nicer. Nice experience. Was it sat in the back and passenger seat, do you think, or not? Did you have more room? Did you feel...
More spacious, yeah.
More space, definitely, isn't it? And
like the boot was massive.
Yeah, you could fit more stuff in there as
Like
well.
Archie's pram looked tiny, whereas in our car it takes up the whole thing.
It literally does. You've got to like, sometimes
It looks
angle
so
it.
small.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. But yeah, I definitely feel like less lower back pain in an American car.
Yes, we have a Prius. But you will see on American roads plenty of either trucks, which is great for transporting stuff, or those minivans. Now, that's not to say that we don't have either of those two things in Britain. They're just not as widely embraced as they are here. I've experienced this. I've travelled again to West Virginia years ago in a minivan because we had multiple people coming with us. And honestly, it was hell now that I think about it, because there were too many people. We'd overestimated.
So these are our school buses.
I could see a situation in where the minivan would be great. I'd have the whole 3 back seats to myself, and then everybody else has to squeeze together in front of me, because that's just who I like my personal space. America gives me that. just not in a Prius. In Britain, we're all about smaller vehicles. I think when I was a
That
kid,
is accurate.
we had a Fiat Uno, tiny hatchback, and I remember we drove fairly long distances in that. Of course, I was a child. I did silly things like, lift my legs up onto the seat, or put them across my brother, or in my mum's face. And I was smaller, so it was easier. I mean, this is doing a disservice to our larger vehicles, but the point is, pound for pound, you don't have quite as much space in British cars, so it's a good job we don't drive as far. But another thing that helps put into perspective the long distances that we may or may not be travelling is how we pass the time. I've noticed that it is a common feature of road tripping in either country to play a game. It's just that the game in question may well differ.
Take, for example,
So, I don't know if you went to France a few times, didn't you? What, if you were on a road trip, have you ever been on a proper, we have, but like with your family, did you have any car games?
I've only been to France once, it was just an hour.
Sound. Well, I was thinking when my grandma and granddad used to take me camping, like caravanning, we used to have Count the Bridges, that used to be one, and whoever I don't think we ever knew who won because you'd count the bridge and then we'd never know who was actually right. So I don't really get the bridge counting game. And then the other one was a license plate game, which I think we played once going up. When Joe and we went up to the UK at the top, we tried to play but gave up after a little bit. Where you start off with one, you find number one, and then you try and get as high as possible.
I don't think I've ever played that.
Yeah, that was a good game. So like you'd be against each other, and if you see the one, the other person can't get it. So if you say you've seen one, boom, you see it, and then you've got to try and get as high as possible.
Oh well.
Other than that, I Spy. That's a common car game, isn't it?
Common one, yeah.
Bingo, apparently, according to Lawrence. That'll be interesting. Not played that in a car.
No, me neither.
Let's see what he says.
Trip bingo. Played in both countries, this is where passengers whip out a bingo card and check off the things they see. Whoever
We do that at the
completes their
football,
card
actually.
first wins. However, it's become clear that the items on a US bingo card don't always match those on a British one. That's because the scenery and the things that occupy it differ somewhat on either side of the pond. For example, the UK's sheep population is around 7 times greater than that of the US, meaning it's literally impossible to have a road trip in the UK without seeing them a lot. Then again, unless you're traveling through the 4 states that have banned it, the same thing might be true in the US when it comes to billboards.
I became aware of a game growing up called Spotto, and this is where you basically look out for a yellow car and then the person who sees it says Spotto. But after I moved to the US...
Wasn't it like
no, we just do
yellow car, no return?
Yeah,
and
car,
then
no returns.
a little whack. You
Little
can't
punch.
see us. Millie did punch me then, but you can't see it.
Yeah. I've never heard of Spotto, but yellow car, no
Yeah, I've
returns.
never heard it Spotto, but like I say. Also, was Mini? Do people use it with Mini as well?
Not me.
Mini car, no return, but yellow car, definitely a big one.
And I was driving around with my wife. She brought to my attention something I'd never heard of called pediddle. And believe it or not, that's not something that you do at a rest stop. This is another game. You and others are on the lookout for a car whose headlight is out, and when you see that, you're supposed to say "pediddle" and hit the roof, apparently, in order to determine who it was who said it first.
And another pastime specific to the US is the license plate game. This is where passengers observe traffic for the license plates of different states. The ultimate goal being to tally up plates from all 50 states. No equivalent for this exists in the UK, where rear license plates, regardless of region, are plain old yellow. Spotto. That said, we do have a
different... is an equivalent. We do the numbers. It's a game. You go from 1 and you go up. If someone spots it, you get whoever spots it gets the number, and the other person can't get that same number.
That's so London, by the way, just the amount of people.
Yeah, that looks underground as well.
Number plate game, in which we might look out for number plates containing, say, a certain letter or number.
But the biggest thing that I've noticed is that Americans are far more likely to break out into song. I thought this was a trope of the films because it happens in National Lampoon's Vacation and many others, until I got into a car with my wife's family. In Britain, I'm not saying we don't ever do that, but I think most of us are probably
that's a song which I don't hear that often, but when I do, I'm like, I really like that song. Yeah.
Conscious about the way we sing, and so that doesn't happen as often. And if it does, we'd have to be drunk, and if we're drunk, we shouldn't be using a motor vehicle. What I'm saying is we reserve the singing for weddings. Now, it's one thing that Google Maps will tell me, ooh, look, it's 9 hours to travel from here to there. But what that doesn't take into account is the fact that you're going to have to stop a lot, especially since we have a dog with us. So along the way, we got out at what Americans know as rest stops.
Okay.
And a lot of the time, rest stops
Service
in the
stations.
United States are sort of small buildings that usually house some bathrooms, as well as pamphlets displaying places to go in the local area. Occasionally, of course, you do find those larger rest stops that have a full-on food court and things like that. They exist as well. In Britain, there are one or two major differences when it comes to these outlets. Firstly, they're not called rest stops. They're known as motorway service areas.
Ooh.
And these are
What do we call-
usually
what do they call
Service. We call them service stations. But
Yeah,
that might be
service
the official
stations,
name.
yeah. That is the official name, isn't it? But yeah, we say, oh, can we stop at the services or something like that?
Yeah.
kind of rest stops. You have your food courts, you have your toilets. You also have a lot more parking space. Partly
Okay.
that's going to be down to the fact that even though we're about the size of Wyoming, we have nearly twice the population of California. And this might also account for the fact that your parking spot within this car park is usually timed.
But it's also down to the fact that ample space is afforded
Lorries.
to trucks, often known as lorries in
Yeah.
Britain. It should be noted that the US concept of truck stops, in other words, stops used exclusively by trucks, are not nearly as common in the UK.
The other thing to note here is that at British rest stops, there's usually a hotel attached to it in case you need
Sometimes.
to stay there overnight. You don't typically find this at American rest stops because most towns or cities have a complex of hotels somewhere in its vicinity. Britain also has hotels, the likes of Travelodge.
Yeah, motels, like I don't think we have them in the UK,
I don't think so.
but they were like, when we were looking at hotels in America, they were cheaper, but you didn't like the idea of it, did you? Which I kind of understood, because
No.
it's like, we're in a foreign country, we don't know the area, we didn't want to be accessible from outside instantly. It's probably just as safe as a hotel. But yeah, we just preferred the idea of your behind entrance, then you got to get through a lift, and then you've got to find what door we're at to get to us, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. They feel a bit weird, motels, don't they?
They're very movie though.
You see them all the time on movies, yeah, but...
And always someone dies in a motel, so.
Yeah, everyone always dies in a...
So
Or
that's one of the reasons.
somebody who has done something dodgy is always hiding in a motel.
Yeah, so that's why.
But I don't think we have any in the UK. I've never seen one.
Premier Inn, and I'm not going to spend this time boring you with the differences between British and American hotels because I did that in a previous video. But what I am going to say is that there's a cheaper alternative in the United States that a lot of road trippers capitalize on, and that alternative is motels. Motels did originate in the United States as a portmanteau of motor hotels, and they are bog standard. About
Yeah.
the term I would use for every motel that I've ever stayed in. There's no swimming pool, there's no jacuzzi or hot tub or anything like that. It's basically just a room, and then you've got the manager's office. It's like in Psycho. We've all seen the Bates Motel. Most motels
Not seen that movie.
feel
No.
like that. I've never been murdered, as proven by the fact that I'm still doing this
That's
video.
positive.
I have felt like there's somebody in the room with me, and it's
Yes.
usually my wife, and everything's fine. From the British side of things, I have two things to say here. Firstly, because we don't travel such great distances, there might be an argument that we don't really need to stop off anywhere en route to where we're actually ending up. So a lot
Yeah.
of the time we don't end up making that sort of overnight stay in the middle of our journey. But if we were to do it, in my experience, we used to just check into one of those Premier Inn hotels
Yeah.
or a travel lodge. Now, I'm not entirely sure if that's normal among all Brits who travel, or if it's just another indication that my family is really middle class.
Again, I don't know if it's an indication for us or not, but I would agree with Lawrence.
Yeah, well, we went up to Rotherham. We stayed at a Premier Inn.
Yeah, stayed at
Halfway.
Premier Inn on the way up, halfway. It was like a 4-hour
stayed
drive
at,
overall.
When we went down to France for a honeymoon, we stayed at a Novotel, which is like a Premier Inn. kind
Yeah,
of
just a hotel in France.
in
We
the
got
middle, halfway.
2 hours down, stayed at a hotel, 2 hours the next day.
Anyway, let me know in the comments if you've been on a road trip in Britain and America and what your observations were. In the meantime, I'm going to go and read about what to do in West Virginia, even though I am now home. While I'm doing
Well, I hope you had a good time in West Virginia. Smash that subscribe button here and check out Launch. We would really appreciate it. Let us know if you have road tripped in both countries.
Yeah.
That would be interesting. And have you enjoyed that?
Yeah, it's been good fun.
What's your video?
Have a fantastic day.
And we see you, legends, in the next one. Peace.